Next, I'll call on Dr. Jenny Farmer. Charles, I hope you organised a prize for that name. That's got to be the most relevant surname that we've had up here. So Dr. Jenny Farmer is a carbon markets expert with the Livestock Data for Decisions Network and Natural State. She has over 20 years of diverse experience as both a research scientist and carbon markets consultant, covering greenhouse gas flux measurements to carbon project feasibility. She's currently working at the intersection of sustainable land use and agriculture, market access and climate finance, with a focus on unlocking carbon market opportunities in emerging economies. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to collecting my prize for the best surname later. Maybe it's a return trip next year. Yeah, a piece of pizza, that'll be great. So I am representing the Livestock Data for Decisions Network, which is based out of the University of Edinburgh. I actually live and work in northern Kenya, which is where I've travelled from. Greetings to my East African friends that are here. And there we live on the edge of the semi-arid region where we have extensive rangelands. They reach up into the Horn of Africa, and there's a very strong pastoralist kind of use and movement of livestock in that landscape, living side by side with wildlife. So it's a fascinating place to work, and I'll bring some of those insights into my discussion today.
Hello, my name is Anna Miranda, and I am the Development Manager for the Livestock Data for Decisions Network. I would like to give you a brief introduction to LD4D. We are a network of over 2,000 livestock experts working in low and middle income countries. Our mission is to support more sustainable livestock systems through data and evidence. LD4D is producing a report on carbon markets for livestock, focusing on Ghana, Nigeria, and Brazil, which Jenny is going to present to you now. It's over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
So earlier this year, the Livestock Data for Decisions Network held a couple of webinars where we had 11 experts as well as moderators discussing lessons from Brazil, Nigeria, and Ghana around livestock and carbon markets, the challenges, the opportunities, and this is just one of many examples of LD4D's work around bringing together different stakeholders within this, this landscape. We had policymakers, project managers, gender specialists, experts within the field, all coming together to share their thoughts on this. So you can find more information through that QR code thing. And I will just go through now some of the key findings from that, bearing in mind that these aren't just my opinions, but of everybody that attended these webinars and participated. So there's a few key points that I want to raise, and I'm going to try to go through these in a little bit of detail to give you some more context. So risk perception is a massive barrier for channeling finance into this sector. That's in-country, and within countries, regionally, we have a lot of variability in legal, political risk, and insecurity as well being a massive challenge in some of these areas where we have considerable numbers of livestock. That's due to conflict over resources, in particular in these areas that are affected already by climate extremes. Also, the long-term timeframes of carbon projects, maybe 20, 30 years that you need to be able to secure long-term impact makes it a bit more risky as well. Finance and de-risking are critical. We need to see bankable project concepts and pilots that can catalyze confidence in this space. And carbon finance maybe needs to be supported by other kind of financial solutions, maybe finance from philanthropy to help catalyze movement in this space. And policy development is critical. And right now, policy development is so varied and at such different levels, I mean, even across Africa. So that really hampers growth. But once financial opportunity is understood by governments, that's a lesson we've seen from Brazil, you really start to see the policy move. So we really need to be kind of better communicating to the communicating panel around the opportunities here. Ghana, as an example, is leading in Africa. They have quite well developed and forward-thinking policies in this space. They have a carbon markets exchange, they're developing multilateral partnerships, they're working on monitoring, reporting, verification. So there is movement in this space, and a country like Ghana is a leading example for others to follow. Agricultural sectors, Brazil is much more developed than a lot of the kind of countries within Africa. They're thinking more about productivity. Africa has very kind of less intensive agricultural systems. And across Brazil and Africa, there's a considerable amount of livestock that are managed and held within family or smallholder contexts, and pastoralists in particular. So Nigeria, for example, has 55 million cattle. 87% of those are held with pastoralists. So if we're thinking about solutions, we need to think about these different contexts. We need to think about aggregation of smallholders, and then solutions for those communities that are mobile, highly mobile, across whole regions or national boundaries with their livestock. There's massive knowledge and technology gaps, so we really need to think about the regional and cultural context that people are living and managing livestock in, and appropriate solutions need to be developed based off of that. We have very big challenges when you're developing carbon projects around setting baselines, thinking about leakage, that you're not then causing a shift and a loss of emissions elsewhere by implementing a project here. So these are some of the technical things we really need to understand and think about. But in particular for cattle keepers, livestock keepers, what is the value proposition of having them change their behavior to a less emissions a lower emitting activity, or improving soil carbon sequestration through grazing management practices? Like, what is the value proposition? Many people are living on a very, very thin line where they're totally dependent on their livestock for their family's survival, their sustenance, their income. So it's not very fair to expect people to change their behaviors when they really don't have a clear understanding of what this is going to mean for them. Within the voluntary carbon markets, there's a number of different carbon standards. They all have methodologies within them that guide how projects need to be developed and implemented and monitor the impact of the activities. There's one enteric methane methodology under Vera, but that's focused on emissions reductions from feed. That's not a particularly suitable intervention in many other countries, where if you have mobile cattle, you're not feeding them anything, they're just eating whatever they find. So we need to build out these methodologies better, and I know there are others working in the room on that, and I myself am working on improving methodologies to include grassland-based activities within them. In terms of monitoring, reporting, and verification, this is very limited, it's expensive, it brings high cost to projects, and that brings uncertainty for investors if it's not being done well. There's a big lack of investment in these monitoring approaches, and so we really need to kind of focus on that. The big lack of data as well within Africa, everyone's very dependent still on just using Tier 1 IPCC default values, so we really need more investment in understanding the science here. Locally developed solutions. We need local validators for carbon projects who actually understand the context that they're being developed in. And considering issues, for example, lack of connectivity, no mobile phone signal, no electricity, people's willingness to use technology. We're seeing a lot of technology development, but we need it to be grounded in these countries where it's going to be used, make sure it's appropriate. There's lessons from Brazil with their precision agriculture and organizations such as Bumitra, who are working across the tropics in monitoring and natural state, who I work with in northern Kenya. And the last point is scaling. There's limited voluntary carbon market uptake of projects at the moment. Any projects we can learn from can help with scaling, but emissions reductions opportunities are very nascent right now, in particular related to methane from livestock. We need lessons from pilots to give us scalable solutions. But those solutions need to be able to be adapted as well. Something that works in one place is not necessarily going to be scalable to everywhere else, but it could maybe be adapted to scale everywhere else. So we need to better understand the cultural context, the social structures, ecological, political, and economic contexts that different projects and interventions are being designed for, and consider the need for cooperatives and aggregation in this space. So those are the kind of key discussion points from everybody that I hope I've synthesized well. So please join the LD4D network. It's free to join. We have lots of really interesting resources, reports, discussions, bringing together different people within this space. So it's a lovely learning space, and feel free to follow on the socials. And anyone who's going to be in Kenya in October for the GGAA conference, if you'd like to spend some time with me in northern Kenya and see some of these pastoralist systems, then please reach out. I'd be very happy to show you around. Thank you.